The topic for today is Apple Security 101. And the goal here is we want to provide a basic overview of some of the native security capabilities with Mac, iPad, and iPhone, and how you can implement those in your organization. We'll highlight how you can do that using the Casper suite. My name is Tad Johnson. I'm with Jamf Software. I'm proud to say I've been with Jamf Software now for almost 6 years. I've gotten a chance to work with a lot of different organizations, different shapes and sizes. And one thing that is consistent, security is always a top requirement. So today we're going to dive into a few of the high-level overview of how we can implement good security on an Apple device and how we can do that using the Casper suite. So the agenda today, we're going to talk about some of the benefits of native security. So contrasting what is built into the operating system that Apple provides versus implementing security using exclusively third-party tools. We'll dive into a little bit more detail on encrypting data, both data at rest and data in transit. We'll talk about application security and how that application layer fits into our security model. And then we'll talk about secure deployments and how you can ensure that your security objectives are met from the first moment that you issue a new device to your users or employees. And then we'll hold some time at the end of the webinar for Q&A. But as we're going here today, please send in your questions and I'll try to get through as many of those as I can. But since I've already mentioned it twice, I should tell you a little more about what it is I'm talking about with the Casper suite. If this is your first time hearing about Jamf Software, the Casper suite, this is just a very brief introduction to what it is we're going to be talking about today and providing some of the common terms and terminology. This is on the wall of all of our offices around the world. Jamf Software, we're helping organizations succeed with Apple. This has been our founding mission statement since 2002 when we got started. And really the goal is simple. We believe that Apple makes really great products. The Mac, the iPad, the iPhone, they've all pushed their respective categories forward. And a lot of organizations are beginning to adopt Apple and bring those in, whether it's a school, a business, government, healthcare. So our job here is to help the IT organizations to deploy, inventory, and secure those Apple devices so that all the users can put them to their best possible use. The way we do that, we create the Casper suite. Now, as the name implies, the Casper suite is a collection of a few different pieces of technology. The server, or I should say the brains of the Casper suite is the Jamf Software Server, or JSS. This is the server that's going to communicate with all of the Apple devices in your organization, as well as provide you as an IT administrator a web-based console that you can interact to do your security configurations, your inventory, and your deployment setup. The Casper suite includes a number of utilities that an IT administrator can use for tasks like building software packages, creating images for a Mac and deploying those images. And it includes user-facing software. So we have a number of iOS and Mac apps. Self-service is the one that I'll mention today. Self-service is an on-demand app catalog that you can create or you can offer to your users where they can then go in and install software or configurations that you've approved. We also make a tool for teachers called Casper Focus that helps with managing a classroom full of iPads. All of this is included with the Casper suite. So when you hear we talk about the Casper suite, this is what it is we're talking about. But today we're going to spend most of the time just talking about that web-based console with the JSS. That JSS server, again, that can live it's a server-based or a server-based piece of software. It can live on-premise, so you can host that yourself on a Mac, Windows, or Linux server, or we can host that for you through the Jamf Cloud. And since it's web-based, you can interact with the JSS on any web browser, whether that's on a Mac, a PC, a tablet, or a mobile device. So with that little overview out of the way, let's dive into the subject at hand and talk a little bit about Apple native security. When we start thinking about security, the reason that I always like to start on Apple native security is it comes with a few benefits. One just being kind of the pedigree of the OS X and iOS operating system. They're both built on a Unix foundation, something with many decades of research and development behind it, and a real strong OS framework, or a strong security framework, I should say. On top of that, Apple has created a really powerful framework for implementing and configuring security controls. A lot of this, of course, Apple is famous for making very easy to use software. So what I'll show you today is how you can implement some of these security controls individually, one at a time by hand. But the power of this and where we come into play is taking these security configurations and deploying them to a large group of devices. So you can not only set up one Mac securely, you can set up hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands across your organization. So we always like to start with Apple native security. But as we're going here today, if you have specific needs that aren't met, or you have needs that go beyond what's possible with Apple native security, of course you can always add third-party products on top. And most of the major security vendors now support Apple out of the box as well. So first off, let's talk about data encryption. Data encryption it's no longer an option. It is critical. If you have any sort of mobile device, whether that's a mobile phone, a tablet, a MacBook, anything that might be leaving the confines of your office, it's really best practice to encrypt all the data on that. That's when we talk about data at rest, we think about disk encryption or device encryption. Next up, for the data that is going between your device and some other server or service, we think about how can we protect data in transit. And here we're going to talk about VPN, a virtual private network, so that you can protect the data as it moves wirelessly from your device to another service. Along the way, you want to be able to provide compliance monitoring, so you can demonstrate to your security team that these controls are in place. You can do this through the inventory system of the Casper suite that will get up-to-date information about the configuration of all the devices in your organization. And then we'll talk about the layer of application trust in a moment as well. But first off, let's start with that data at rest. On a Mac with OS X, we think of data at rest as using the built-in disk encryption. This is called FileVault. Now it's called FileVault 2, as this is the second major iteration that's been included with OS X. It's built into the operating system, so you don't have to add any additional software in order to encrypt a drive on a Mac. You can enable this manually, so a user can go in and turn this on themselves, or you as an IT admin can remotely enable FileVault across all the devices in your organization. And encryption keys can be centrally stored so that you have a key in case you need to go back and recover data, or if a user forgets their password, or if someone leaves your organization, you need to retrieve the data that was encrypted. If you're managing this FileVault process, you can keep an encryption key safely secured. And it's worth noting, Apple went through the process of working with the federal government here in the US, and they are FIPS 140-2 certified. So the encryption system that FileVault 2 is built on, it meets the highest standards for federal government encryption, meaning this is truly enterprise-grade encryption, really high-quality stuff. So what does this look like? If you're on a Mac and you open up the security or the system preferences and go over to the security and privacy window, you can see there's an option here for FileVault. Now this shows that FileVault's already turned on. If it hadn't yet been turned on, I have an easy button that just says turn on FileVault. That's the easy way to do it for one at a time or manual use. But since we're more concerned about how we can manage it across an organization, this is where the Casper suite comes in. We can deploy a configuration profile or a policy that will enable FileVault 2, and then we can retrieve the encryption keys so that we have those available in case we need to decrypt it down the road. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So here I'm going to log into my JSS, the web console of my Jamf software server. And here I happen to be using our Jamf Cloud hosted instance. So I'll log in with my credentials, and then I'm going to start off by creating a configuration profile. And here, looks like I've already started one. I can edit this and show you how easy it is to set up these requirements. A configuration profile is, again, we're using the Apple native configuration capabilities here. What you can see is I can check the box to require FileVault 2. I can create an individual recovery key, which will then be stored by the JSS. And I can optionally also require FileVault 2 after hibernation for an extra layer of security. Then I can also configure for my FileVault recovery key redirection. So I want to automatically redirect any recovery keys back to the JSS, meaning even if a user turns this on themselves, I'll still have that recovery key stored in my JSS. So I've created this configuration profile. I've set the FileVault 2 configurations that I want. Now I can go in here and I can choose either a group of users, a group of computers, or I can say individual buildings, departments, user groups, etc. So this is where you can choose which groups within your organization you want to apply this to. In my example here, I want this to apply to everyone, so I've added all my managed clients into this group. What this does is when I save this, this will send this configuration profile out to all the Macs that are managed by the JSS. Again, because we're just using the native Apple technology here, it's going to turn on that native FileVault 2 disk encryption, and now I can take full advantage of that encryption technology that's built right into OS X. On mobile devices, for an iPad or an iPhone, it's even easier because the iOS device has hardware encryption built in. Once you have a passcode set, that device is now taking advantage of that encryption. So if I wanted to do the same thing on an iOS device, all I have to do is require that we have a passcode defined. And as long as I do that here, I create my passcode configuration. Here I can set the complexity, the length of that passcode that I want. Once that's applied, now I have my iOS device encrypted as well. Easy enough to do. Let's jump back. So this is, again, a quick overview of how you can implement good data at rest encryption on either a Mac or an iOS device using a configuration profile. How about for those times when we're thinking about data going out wirelessly from our device? Obviously, we all use Wi-Fi almost constantly in our daily lives. It's rare that we're exclusively hardwired into our network. And more often than not, we have users that are connecting from networks outside of our organization. So they might be traveling and they're connecting from an airport or a hotel. Maybe you have someone working from home. They might be stopping by a cafe and connecting to a public network there. In those moments where you're connecting to an unknown or untrusted wireless network, it's really a best practice to use VPN so that you can establish a secure connection back to your trusted organization network, and then you can rest assured that the data that you're transmitting will be protected and encrypted end to end. How do we do this? Good news is, again, OS X and iOS include VPN support. So they have built-in VPN clients that can connect to a number of the most popular VPN servers on the market. Again, VPN, virtual private network. Just as we saw with FileVault, you can either enable this manually by going into your system preferences in the network pane, or I can define a configuration profile so that I can configure VPN across all the devices in my organization. Let's take a look at what that looks like. So I'm back here at my JSS. For this one, why don't I start with mobile devices? I'm going to create, again, a configuration profile for my iOS device. I'm going to say this is my VPN settings. And what I can do here in the VPN connection, this is where I can define the VPN settings that are appropriate for my VPN server. So this is where if you're already responsible for the VPN server, you probably already have this information. If not, you might want to talk to your networking engineer or maybe your security engineer who has the details that you need to complete this. I will enter my my VPN server. The account, I can either, if I leave this blank, that'll simply prompt the user when they try to connect to VPN. And just as we did with our other configuration profile, here I can choose multiple devices, groups of devices, users, or user groups. So why don't I say all Jamf employees for this one? Oops. Now when I save that, again, this is going to push out this configuration profile to my iOS devices. The benefit here is that now I don't have to go through that. I don't have to individually type in the VPN server on all of my mobile devices. I don't have to explain exactly how that works to everyone in my organization. I can do this once from the Casper Suite web console and then have those settings deployed out to all the devices in my organization. Very similar if we go over to the Mac side, where I can turn on VPN just as we did on the iOS devices with a configuration profile. I'll also mention that Apple has implemented a new protocol that is a per app VPN connection. So if you have certain apps that you want to always require VPN when they're used, maybe your sales app or your secure document app, you can also define an app that's based on the apps that are going to be using it. So there's a couple different ways we can use VPN. This is, again, native technology built into the OS X and iOS operating system, and here you can configure it using the Casper Suite. Now let's talk a little bit about application security. After all, we can encrypt our data and we can have VPN, but if the applications we're using are infected with malware or they can't be trusted, then our security posture is compromised. Here, Apple has been really pushing forward the industry in making apps as safe as possible to download and use. One of the things they've implemented on both Mac and iOS is a sandbox model. You can think of it as each app lives in its own sandbox, so it can only read its own data, meaning if I download a new game, that game can't read my Facebook data or my emails. Of course, applications need to exchange data between each other, so there are trusted paths where an application can either read or write to certain other bits of shared data. You might see this on an iOS device, if you've ever used the open-in command, you'll notice that only certain apps can interact with certain other apps. And if you've ever been prompted to allow access or allow permission, for example, to access your calendar or to access your contacts, that is because this is one of those this is because of the protected sandbox model where each app needs to ask for permission before it can read that shared data. On an iOS device, the only place to get apps are coming from the iOS App Store. This is great because it means there's a single trusted source for software. On OS X, you can do the same approach using a system called Gatekeeper. Gatekeeper is what tells the Mac which software it can trust to run and install. The options for Gatekeeper is you can have it only use apps from the Mac App Store. What's more common is apps from the Mac App Store or apps that are signed by a trusted developer. I think that's what we recommend. And the great thing is with the way that Apple's implemented this, you in your organization, you can sign your own application. So if you're doing internal app development or simply repackaging apps that you're going to deploy to the Mac, you can sign those so they'll be trusted by Gatekeeper. Now, one thing to note on this, you might have seen a few recent headlines about malware making its way into the App Store. And as it turns out, this was because some developers had downloaded Xcode, which is the software development kit made by Apple, used to create and compile applications that will then go into the App Store. They had downloaded Xcode from a third party that wasn't Apple. That means that it wasn't actually this version of Xcode had been compromised, and it was injecting malicious code into their apps beyond, outside of their knowledge. But it's another reflection of how critical it is that you can trust the sources and that you are trusting that when you download software, you know where it's coming from and it's signed by that developer so that you know it hasn't been modified in transit. This is what that looks like for an individual user if you go into the system preferences and you want to modify your Gatekeeper settings. So here you can see the default option is to allow apps from Mac App Store and identified developers. That's where an app has been signed by a trusted developer. And if you want to be more restrictive, you can allow only from the Mac App Store, or if you want to be less restrictive, you can allow from anywhere. And again, since iOS only has one source to get apps from the iOS App Store, so there's no real option here since there's only that one destination to get apps. And I bet you're sensing a pattern now. You, of course, can configure this remotely using the Casper suite. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment. But first, when we talk about application patching, this is really a critical piece of the application security layer. We know since the dawn of computer science, when the first bugs were literal bugs, all software has bugs. We are humans, we are imperfect, and we make imperfect software. The key is that you have software vendors you can trust who are going to find and fix those bugs and vulnerabilities as they're discovered. So the most important thing with patching is that you have a strategy, whether that's you're going to roll out an update as soon as it's available, whether you're going to have a weekly or a monthly patching cycle when all of the apps across your organization are updated. Whatever that is, make a strategy, get your users to buy in, make it as easy as possible for them. That's where you might want to use self-service, which is a tool for publishing that app catalog. And you can use the inventory data that you gather from the Casper suite to quickly identify where you have where you have systems that need to be patched, where they're running out-of-date software. So now let's take a look at both of those things I just talked about. So first off, since we talked about Gatekeeper, if this is something that you want to enable in your organization, what you can do here, if I go back to my OS X configuration profiles, I can choose my security and privacy payload. I'll configure that, and here, right there in Gatekeeper, I can set how I want all the Macs in my organization to behave. So I want to say Mac App Store and identified developers, and now if I wanted to, I could also say do not allow users to override these settings. So even if someone is a more savvy user and they know that they can control click to get around the Gatekeeper requirement, here I can define those settings for them. So this is a way that we can really use Gatekeeper to full effect. And I should mention as well, if you are using the Casper suite to deploy, to build and deploy software packages, of course, that's where you can sign those packages so that they will be considered from an identified developer, as long as you sign up for the Apple developer program. Now, on the application patching front, this is where you can use the Casper suite inventory data to identify where you might have out-of-date software. So if I look for all my computers, what I can do here is I can look at my applications. I can see for every computer, it's going to gather the installed applications as well as the version that's been installed. So you can see what software is on my Mac. And this is how I can easily identify when it's time to deploy an update. What I can do with this is I can create what's called a smart computer group. So I can say I want everyone, so OS 10 update. I want my OS where'd that go? There we go. So I can choose for, if I want to see everyone who does not have 10.10.4, for example. I can set a smart group like this. This will automatically find anyone who's not currently running 10.10.4, whatever that version is. Again, same idea if I'm using third-party software, searching for a specific version. And then I can use this group to scope and deploy my software updates. So whether that is when Apple issues software updates, they always issue a combo updater that can be used to update any previous system within that upgrade family to the latest. And most software vendors, if they'll either issue an update file that you can deploy as is, or you can just install the newer version over the top of it. For example, Firefox, you're not going to get a patch for Firefox. You can just deploy a whole new version of Firefox using the Casper suite. So that's a quick taste of app security, of how we can do that with the Casper suite. Last topic before we pause here is talking about secure deployments. And this is, I want to make another pitch. If you have not yet looked at the device enrollment program, I'd really encourage you to look at this. It's a really unique program that Apple has developed. What it allows you to do is you can associate all of the devices that your organization owns, whether they're iPad, iPhone, or Mac. And you can say, I want all of those devices to be managed by my organization's management server, in this case, the Casper suite. Then, whenever one of these new devices is turned on and they go through the Apple Setup Assistant, it will automatically enroll itself in your management server. And all of those configuration profiles that we've been building today will automatically be applied at that very first moment of a new device getting powered on. So you're really shrinking the amount of time between brand new device getting in the hands of a user and having that device fully securely configured. You're eliminating any guesswork, and you're taking away the burden of having to one by one go back and enroll each of those devices. So if you're interested in really making this process simple, check out the device enrollment program. It's free to use, so Apple doesn't charge anything for the device enrollment program. We integrate with it with the Casper suite. It's a great way to deploy devices and ensure that your security is configured from day one. Last, two final points I want to make, and then we'll wrap it up there. First off, if this is at all interesting to you, I'd really encourage you to go check out Jamf Nation. JamfNation.com is the online community of thousands of IT professionals who are all focused on managing Apple devices. Now, we host JamfNation.com, but this is not only reserved for our customers. This is a broad community. You can talk with people who are facing similar challenges, sharing best practices, and getting ideas on how to best manage Apple devices in your organization. And if you are interested in learning more, if you want to get a more personally tailored demo, if you want to dive deeper, if you want to talk to one of our engineers about how you can implement this in your organization, please contact us and we can connect you with a systems engineer to work with you individually. If you head over to jamfsoftware.com, you can see across the top of the page there, you can call, email, or chat online. We'd love to get to get you connected with an engineer to help solve your specific challenges and give you a more personally tailored demo of what the Casper Suite can do. Other than that, have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your week, and hope to see you again on a webinar soon. Thanks.